Step number 2 is to clarify who is the decision maker. So the author says something quite interesting. He said that people at lower levels of bureaucracy, such as the planner, they might see themselves as simply making a recommendation that is passed on to up the line for decision makers to consider. But people who are at higher levels, so maybe you might think about the city council or even the mayor's office or the mayor, they might say or think, by the time that things get back to me, most of the decisions are already made. So this person will think, or department, that the planner or the planning division actually make this decision. So you have like this contradictory perspective, and this could be problematic because if the final decision maker is not involved in those like first stages of the planning process, so it might be the city council, the mayor, it can be the planning commission, they might actually derail the whole project at the end. And it would be very embarrassing if this actually happened during a public meeting with the planning commission, with the city council or the mayor. Maybe all of them or one of these like entities might vote against your project, and if you actually talk to them ahead of time through the start of the process and the continuation of the planning process, and you debrief them constantly, then you could have anticipated a decision that like not passing a plan because they felt that it wasn't appropriate, even though maybe the public supported this alternative. They are the final decision maker. It's very important to bring them on board early on, because at the end they are the ones who's going to vote yes on the project. You don't want to be in that very bad position. So to reduce the risk of a decision maker, just like derailing a plan that happens, you have to involve them early on. And some of the questions that you can ask of them are, what are the issues that you believe that will be most controversial in this plan or decision? Which stakeholder groups are more likely to exert some kind of influence to senior management? So you want to ask questions about power relations. Whose participation in the process is really key? So you can ask them about people in the community or stakeholders. Maybe it's a particular board or a particular department within your city. So you want to make sure that all the people that need to be in the table are in the table, or in this case, people who need to be debriefed and bring on board early on of the public participation process. You want to ask them also at which points you want to be debriefed of the public participation process. What boundaries or constraints do you believe that the process should have? Do you, as a decision maker, want to review the public participation plan? So this is even before the plan is created. Give them a chance to comment on how the public input will be obtained in this particular project. What are the issues that you believe that will be again more controversial? And again, these are these different questions that you can ask, and many of them are already in the chapter. So the author describes that it's not unusual for different parts of the organization to have different opinions about what is the problem that they are trying to solve. So the step number 3 is to clarify the decision being made or the problem that is being answered. So the author actually showed an example of an environmental protection in where different agencies or different departments inside of the same team or agency, they believe that they had a different problem at hand. So some thought that the public participation program was created so they can discuss whether the sodium removal facility to be built in the city. Others thought that it was to discuss the technologies that are best for sodium removal, and while others thought that it was to discuss whether this technology can contribute to nuclear proliferation. So as you can see, these are very different questions. This is why the author recommends that if you have, like, again, different departments or different agencies, you actually ask each person what is the problem that we are trying to solve. Ask them for a 1 or 2 sentence description of the problem that you're trying to answer, and the next step is for you to actually make sure that everybody knows why we are doing this. So for researchers, this will be like, what is the research question, right? We always go back to the research question, because you can create all these surveys and all these interviews or these different methods, and they might not answer the question that you're trying to answer. So that's why having the research question, in this case a problem statement that you're trying to solve, is very, very important, to always have like a target and to always have a goal of what you are actually trying to do or the question that you're trying to answer. So you have to be also very careful about how you define the problem, so you can satisfy yourself to make sure that you dedicated time to figure out what is the problem that you're trying to answer or what is the question that you have. Because if anything, this is the most important part. So you need to dedicate time, as like all your next steps are going to be predicated on this like first step, which is like framing what is the question, what are we trying to do, what is the goal. So the other thing you have to do is like make sure that everybody in your team understands what is the goal, what is the question, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and there's some internal agreement, and people should know by heart what they are like trying to do. One of the outcomes you hope from discussing the problem definition is that you will clarify also what is the need for the project. So if there's no problem or issue, maybe there's not a need to do the project at all. So someone or some part of the organization needs to think that there's a problem that needs to be solved, and therefore there's an impetus to do the project. And the author had an example in where people raised the question about, do we need this at all? So you don't want to be in the public meeting and somebody all of a sudden says something like that. You want to make sure that the project is actually needed. So you might frame a question such as like, which site do you prefer for X or Y project? Do you prefer site A or site B? And the response of the people might be, well, what we need the project at all. So it's like very important that you address that first question, if you need the project at all to begin with. So the public thinks in terms of values and priorities. So the larger questions of political philosophy rather than what are the technical options. So if you appear that you're asking the public questions that you should answer because you are the technical experts, they're going to be confused about why you're asking them to weigh in something that is like technical. So again, this goes back to the role of the planner and the role of the community. The role of the planner is to be the technical expert and to offer alternatives, to do research, to know what are the regulations and so on. That's not the job of the community. The job of the community is to talk about what are their values, what do they care about, what they would like to see in their communities, how they envision their community. So you need to ask the right questions for the public to be involved. So instead of asking, where should irrigation canals be located? So that's a very technical question. It's like a question such as like, where should I locate the firehouse, right? Or the firefighting station. That's something that you should be able to answer by doing research, things that require mapping and analysis of populations, supply and demand, things like that. But you can ask a very interesting question to the public, something that will be interesting to them and it will be valuable to them. So in the case of like, instead of asking where should irrigation canals be located, you will ask, is this an appropriate area to have agriculture, or should we have agriculture in our community?